All right, guys, welcome to a very special chat with our partner and amazing friend to INCM, Karl Bastian. We're just going to be hanging out, continuing conversation around VBS and technology. And I am so glad that you joined us. If you're just hanging out today and just having some fun, maybe you're eating lunch, or maybe it's early or late where you are. No matter, we're just going to have some fun here over the next 30, 45 minutes and be talking about Vacation Bible School and technology. And of course, I'm joined by the kidologist and our good friend, Karl Bastian. How you doing, Karl?
I'm doing great. Great to be here with you. Get to hang out.
Yeah, this is going to be a lot of fun. And let me encourage those of you who are watching this live to be using the chat box. So if you have questions for us as it relates to VBS or technology or things that you've come across, you have specific questions, go ahead and type those into the chat. We're just going to have some fun here over the next 30, 45 minutes and learn from one another and talk about some key topics. Karl, I know you've spent many years in the church. You're serving kids in a variety of forms, and you and I have had this conversation before that today's kids are a little different, than certainly the way you or I grew up.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that means ministry may have to make some changes. And so before we kind of get into maybe some nuts and bolts type things or specific ideas, I'd like to talk about that, ask you that kind of open-ended question. Where do you see today's kids, and how do you see ministry to kids needing to change?
Wow, that's a great question. And I should have had you email them all to me ahead of time. But, ministry today is different. It used to be the kids of divorce were the kids you saw every other week. Yeah. And so you might try to adapt where you have a memory verse for the month instead of a new memory verse every week to be sensitive to those kids. But, the studies today are showing that the trend is to attend church once or twice a month, but it's not necessarily kids of divorce anymore. Our culture is busy. Our families are being pulled in a lot of directions, good directions. We could argue all day till we're blue in the face that church ought to be a priority and they ought to be there every week. And yet, that's not realistic because it just isn't the way it is. I was a pastor full-time in ministry from the time I graduated Bible college for over 20 years. And then in 2006, I took a break and went full-time with Kidology. And it was very fascinating switching to being a dad now. And church shopping was really a strange experience for us as a family because, we'd never church shopped. We had job shopped. But once I was hired at a church, my job was to be there every week. And so I remember, even being a little judgmental, and I hate that word. It's the harshest way to say it, but just of families that weren't faithful or weren't, in my view, committed. But then becoming, I guess I'll never be normal, but a somewhat normal, just dad, head of household, I began to see another side. And I think I softened a little bit because there were times when we got back late on Saturday night from vacation and was like, what? I want to go to church, but what? That's not necessarily what's best for my family, or people weren't feeling, when it wasn't my job to be there, there were times where I felt that guilt. And I'm like, how much of that's the legalism, of church and how much of that's just life? And kind of coming to a place where, yes, we're committed to church, we're faithful. I'll go alone if my wife and kid are sick, and I'll still serve and be a good volunteer. But at the same time, I've realized that, it isn't realistic for families to be there every week. And so that we have to adapt to that. And I think it is important to have themes that go over a month and challenges and things so that kids don't feel like they missed half of it. But it's also that in reaching the lost, when people got spiritually interested, they would go to church. Well, church is not at the top of people's our cultural list. I mean, we used to talk about reaching the unchurched child. Well, now I think our goal is, how do we reach an unchurched culture? You know, it isn't that the Barney Fife days where everybody has the house and the picket fence and goes to church on Sunday. And so getting outside of the walls and finding out how to meet needs is a big challenge. And there's no end to ideas, from a tutoring program to an after school program to ministry outreach. And I'd love to share a little bit how we redid VBS. But the answer isn't, you know, a program or even what somebody else did. It's really wrestling with that with God and saying, God, how do I reach my community and how do I reach the people here? Because the need and the reasons are universal, but the solutions and the application is as unique as your church. And so, you know, often when people have success, you know, I was in the town of Willow Creek. My little church was called Village Church, and we were a big church, almost 1,000. But of course, compared to Willow Creek, you know, we were little. So a lot of people got saved there, and then ended up coming to our church because we wanted a smaller church. But the being in that community, everybody thought, well, you should do church the way Willow Creek does. And a lot of people that did that, it didn't work. Then they blamed Willow Creek instead of realizing, no, it works for them, but you have to find what works for you.
Yeah, that's a great point. You know, we got to be faithful to the things that God calls us uniquely to.
Yeah.
And, you know, that I think you hit on a critical change and trend for, you know, children's pastors and leaders and churches, you know, who are dealing with this everywhere. And Allison pointed to this as well. Parents and families are overextended and are booked from a schedule standpoint.
Yeah.
So when it comes to, you know, I think sports might have been what was the dominant thing, you know, maybe in the last 5 years, you know, or so. But I'm even seeing at our church, it's not just sports, it's just additional activities.
Yeah.
So it's not, I have someone in softball and they're in travel softball. My oldest daughter loves softball, is a big softball player. But they also do theater, and there's theater stuff and rehearsals, yeah. And I think you're absolutely right. You hit the nail on the head when it comes to our culture. It is an unchurched culture, especially as it relates to Sunday used to be a sacred day.
Well, you know, Chariots of Fire was the big movie when we were young, and you know, we admired someone who wouldn't compete on Sunday.
Yes.
That movie probably wouldn't succeed today because we would say, that's legalist.
Right.
And, you know, if you have a chance to be in the Olympics and share your testimony and give glory to Jesus when you win the race, you know, I'm in Tim Tebow former territory, you know, where he did the Tebowing and all that. And so, you know, I wouldn't tell a family, no, your kid shouldn't be in the championship, but should they sign up for something where there's games every Sunday for 3 months? You know, that's the dilemma. You know, one of the things I love about CPC is that, and I made this commitment years ago, and I always challenge people to go into every single booth, even if it's brief, hear their story, because walking by, we tend to judge a booth by its decor, just like we'll judge a book by its cover. And I remember years ago, I stopped into the booth for Uncharted Waters, which I thought was a missions organization, and it's a sports camp. And my first thought was, you know, we're not going to do sports camp, but I'll hear his pitch, you know. And the more I listened, the more I realized, this was back, man, probably 2002, 2003. It dawned on me that, man, I've got to change my program. VBS appeals to Christian families, and the kids may bring an unsaved friend, but we didn't see any unsaved families just coming because of the flyer or the banner in the front of the church. But our sports camp, we packed it out, and we did cheerleading as well and soccer. And we did something kind of cool. Whatever the price was per kid, and I'm making up numbers I don't remember, but say it was $40 a kid, we doubled the price to $80 and said, your friend is free. So basically, our families paid for their friend, and they had to come as a pair. And of course, we had some church families team up, and that was okay. We didn't police it, but the whole idea was you come with a friend. You pay the fee, and your friend comes free. And we had so many kids come that would never come to the VBS with the crafts and the pit and the worship and the Bible stories and all that. And yet we saw so many kids come to Christ. And that was kind of my first step as a children's pastor of thinking outside the box and going, okay, what will bring unchurched kids into a church? And it may not be what's my favorite thing to do, because I'm not a sports guy. So, my initial reaction to sports camp was, well, I don't like sports. I mean, I'm not a big, now I'm in Denver. The Broncos have kind of turned me into a sports guy. My wife wants to know what aliens took her husband and brought me in, because now I'm following football. But although we had a painful year this year. But yeah, we need variety, and we need to ask those hard questions, and maybe even try something that personally it's not natural to us. But we may find that it surprises us in how well it works.
That's really incredible. And I want to highlight what you just said, which is we may need to try some things that put us outside of our comfort zone, because that's what might reach people who we're not currently reaching. And I think, for every person who works with kids and families, you have to examine, is the way you are doing ministry, specifically the things you are doing in ministry, just because you're comfortable with doing them.
Yeah. And I'm used to being, especially in my younger years, I'm used to kind of it revolving around me, not in a egotistical way, but a practical way as the leader. I love being in front of the kids. I love teaching. And the sports camp, I was like, okay, I'm going to walk around and I'm going to be relational, but I can't teach sports if we want to have good athletes. And so it was incredibly easy to recruit, though. And how many men I had volunteer, because I said, will you come teach a kid how to shoot hoops, or kick a ball? And so that pleasantly surprised me. I had an easier time recruiting for a sports camp. And dads were we needed basketball hoops, and they were getting pickup trucks and bringing their portable hoops. And it was amazing. Can I share something else kind of crazy that we did?
Yeah, go for it.
I know it's VBS Day. Well, everybody probably has read or should have read Barna's book, Transforming Children into Spiritual Champions. It's the worst title of a book ever. It's like a mile long, but it's a fabulous book. And I got to go to the first time he announced that book. Our pastors, the whole staff, went to a Barna seminar, and the book was not out. We got a pre-release paperback copy of, hey, this is coming. And it was a really cool experience, because the first workshop was on the disintegrating and changing worldview. The second workshop was on children's ministry. And then he had 2 or 3 more that day. Well, at the beginning of the children's ministry session 2, I'll never forget this. Barna walked up to the podium and he just stood there and he didn't say a word. And it got a little awkward. And finally, as the room got silent, wondering why he wasn't speaking, he said, I'd like all you senior pastors to put away your sermon prep. And then he just got silent again. And then he said, I'm serious, put it away. And then there was this rustle of papers throughout the entire room. And I got chills down my back. And then he was angry. He said, I got to start out by saying I'm a little ticked off at you. He said, I've had pastors ask if they could have a 20% refund because they don't want to pay for the children's ministry seminar because they don't need it. He said, I've been asked hundreds of times to move it to the end of the day so they could leave early. And then he said, the reason this session is second is because the first session was on the problem, and now we're going to talk about the solution, and the solution is children's ministry. And I'm sitting there going, yes, and so he unpacked it, and I don't need to explain all that because our viewers know all that. But when we got back to the church, I was kind of curious because my ministry had really gotten puffed up, and I thought, okay, they're going to try and knock me down or push back a little bit. And my youth pastor came to me about a week later, and he said, hey, Karl, I've really been thinking about what Barna shared. And he said, this isn't a youth ministry versus children's ministry, but he said, I do want to offer you a challenge with a question. And he did this in a very godly way, and I really appreciated his premise. But he said, in the youth ministry, we're reaching a lot of unchurched teenagers whose parents don't come to church, and they're getting saved and they're getting discipled. And Jim led a great high school, junior high ministry, so props to him. And he said, I can give you a list of the names of the teenagers that we have led to Christ in the last 12 months who are not from a Christian home. And he said, and this is what I want to say hesitantly, he said, I know children's ministry leads a lot of kids to Christ, but my question is, are they all in Christian homes? He said, where they would have accepted Christ anyway. And you're kind of putting feathers in your cap for kids that would have been saved anyway. And he was very careful to say that, not to minimize, we still celebrate them. And he said, but can you give me a list of names of kids who your ministry's led to Christ who otherwise would not have come to Christ? And I thought it was a very important and valid and fair question. So I said, well, let me get back to you. And so I went to my children's ministry team and I said, here's the challenge Jim has given us. Can you give me some names of kids that have come to Christ that are not from a Christian home over the last 12 months? And we couldn't think of anybody. And so we said, well, if we want to say we have the ripest field, how are we going to do this? And so to jump ahead, we decided to do something called Backyard Bible Blasts. We didn't use any curriculum. We asked parents to loan us their front yard or backyard, and we'll bring the program. I did gospel magic, and we brought teenagers to lead games, and we brought the tents and the jumping thing. And we basically said to parents, your job is to invite your neighbors and pass out flyers, provide refreshments, and give us your yard and let the kids use the restroom. We'll do all the rest. We did those all summer. And it was funny because people wanted to know where they were at our church, and we wouldn't publish it because this isn't VBS at the Johnson's house. The Johnsons don't want 80 church kids coming. That you can only come if Mrs. Johnson invites you. Now, we didn't police it. If she asked another mom, hey, will you come do this with me? And your kids are welcome. That's fine. But that was the only way you would know when these were. And we reached over 500 kids that summer. And they were almost entirely unchurched. Some maybe came from a Catholic church, whatever. And then some people might disagree with this, but I didn't share the gospel. We shared biblical principles and godly truth, and we were building relationship. And the reason I didn't share the gospel is I thought if my kid went to a neighbor's house thinking it's a fun thing, and he came home and said, hey, Dad, I'm a Jehovah's Witness, or Dad, I'm Muslim, I'd be irate, right? I would feel betrayed and tricked. And so that's fair in reverse. So I didn't want any kid to go home saying, hey, I prayed to receive Jesus, and go, what? I thought you were just at the Johnson's house, because now the Johnsons are going to be the enemy of the neighbor. But what we did do is invite them all to a kids crusade at our church in the fall. And we took out all the stops and we did a great theme. I'm not going to share any of that because it's irrelevant, but they came. But in our church building, we're unabashedly going to share the gospel. And we had 96 kids come to Christ that fall. And it wasn't 100. I was so frustrated, but that was our goal. But I went back to Pastor Jim and I was able to actually lay down, the list of names and phone numbers of children from unchurched families that we led to Christ. So the next year, I was at Costco one day, and I have a philosophy. This is a rabbit trail. I have a philosophy of you should buy whatever kids' parents would never let them buy. And you should have the toys, like you should have the Sphero. No parent's going to spend $100 on a remote control ball, but if you have a Sphero, you're cool. Whatever it is, things like that. Well, we're at Costco, and there's this inflatable slide, 12 feet tall, it has cannons. And my first thought was, who would buy that? It's expensive. It's huge. It'll ruin your grass. And then it hit me. We're going to buy that for the church. So the next summer we did backyard Bible splashes instead of backyard Bible blasts. And we made pictures. I said, I'm going to bring this to your house for one day. Kids are going to play water games. They're going to play on this thing. We gave it away at the end of the summer through a raffle because I had no place to store it at church. And so that year was the same thing. And again, we had an outreach in the fall and kids got saved. And I never did again because after that year was when I went full time with Kidology. But the impact of that was powerful. It equipped families to reach their neighbors. We had unsaved kids, coming to Christ, and once they transitioned into the church, because most people never heard of a kids pastor, and they have a stereotype of a preacher. Well, now Mrs. Johnson can go to the neighbors and say, hey, we're having this VBS or sports camp or something. And now they've met Pastor Karl. They found out he's not weird. He's just a fun guy. The kids loved him, and it built a relational bridge, because we basically took church to their house, and they got to get a taste of our children's ministry. And I have a link here. I'm going to put it in here. I have like a top secret link. It's hidden on my blog. It's kidologist.com/BBB, which stands for Backyard Bible Blast. And that's a page I'd actually had just put up for our church. And it's just pictures from the Backyard Bible Blast. So you'll see in the water one, you'll see my Waternator outfit, where I looked like I was kind of looks like from Back to the Future when he played the music to George McFly. Was it George McFly? Anyway, I've got the chemical suit on and the water guns, and I did water fights with the kids, and it was a blast. And
that's awesome. You know what, Karl? I want to make sure that I get this question in.
Sure.
Christine asked, did you have the same team all summer to go in and help you with those, or were teams varied as you went, around?
The host would develop the team for their event.
Okay.
And then I had a team that brought the program, and that did vary because of vacations and things, but Sure. It was just really 2 or 3 adults and a bunch of teenagers. And we did some training with them on appropriate play and stuff like that. But yeah, it was pretty easy. In fact, right now, isn't Josh Denhart speaking at this webinar, or he did a general session? I saw his picture.
He's going to be up next, I believe, at 1:00.
Oh, awesome. Well, if you have a Q&A, ask him how to get his free download. He just offered last week. He did a very similar thing. And we got a church to loan us a car and a horse trailer, and we just threw it all in there. Josh did this custom van, and he has all these pictures of stacking games. I mean, he's a chemist. So, I mean, I saw what he did, and I was like, oh, where was this PDF, 15 years ago when I needed it? So, and he's giving it away free, and it's really the details. In fact, I downloaded it, and I sent it to the church I'm involved in now as a volunteer. I sent it to our children's ministry leader and said, I'll run this if you want to do this summer, because we're a church plant. And I'm excited. I'm hoping they'll get on board and want to do it, because I think what a great way for a church plant, because we don't even have a building, to get out in the neighborhoods this summer and then invite people to come to church on Sunday. So Josh has like immaculate details on how to put together your vehicle and stuff.
That's awesome. Josh is one of our good friends at INCM, and he will be part of INCM Web Week as well. Karl, I know I want to highlight for everybody who is watching us live, if you do have questions that came up as we're talking about the splash or the Backyard Bible Blast,
absolutely.
Please ask that in the chat while we're waiting.
And if I miss it, just have them go to our Kidology Facebook group, and I can put that link in there, and just join the group and just ask it right there.
Away.
And I can pull that link pretty quick.
Yeah, you bet. I did want to mention, as we're talking about thinking kind of outside of the VBS box in ways to reach more kids. One of the things that our church did, we had been a long-time VBS church. We did, kind of your typical half-day VBS in the summer for a week, and then we did another week that was for early childhood. We did charge, for that. I know that's kind of dependent upon where you're at, where your city and your community. But then we made a big change, and I would say, we were doing great. The VBS program was awesome. We had all of the metrics were good, related to it. But we looked and we said, we think we could reach more people, especially our community, in better ways if we stopped and we considered a backyard Bible club. In fact, one of our campuses did that for a summer, but the campus that I was part of at the time started doing a summer day camp. So they extended, full-on day camp. They did, I think they started in the first year, they did 8 weeks. And one of the things that they saw happen was that it seemed like most of the kids who were coming for that day camp were not affiliated with any church. They weren't affiliated with our church. They just, their parents, you guys know, for those of you, who are working in church or in life of your own family, parents during the summer are looking for a place for their kids, for especially if both mom and dad work, which is pretty common. And so everybody's trying to answer that question. And
and there's now, sports camps. There's several. Mega Camp, I know, is at CPC, Uncharted Waters. There's a new one now. I think we discovered them at CPC as well, called Kid Shine. That is a drama camp.
Yeah.
And then one of my good friends, Stanley Mears, he actually took the dramas out of Josh's science VBS and did a drama camp, just using the dramas from them. So, being creative is the key. And I also always want to be clear, I'm not anti-VBS. We took a strategic break the first year to do Backyard Bible Blast. But of course, VBS has its benefits. To me, the number one benefit is significant spiritual memories for kids.
Yep.
You create these memory anchors that will last them their lifetime. They'll talk as an adult about that year at church when there was a giant pirate ship, in the gymnasium. And so we actually came back with VBS the next year, and we did VBS and the Backyard Bible Splashes.
Oh, great idea.
But we also changed it up. One year we did groups evening VBS. I think they had a Nazareth Bible Times one. And VBS, and we actually required the parents to attend with the kids. And if it was not drop off, and we said, now if you want to, if the Guevaras want to say to the Bastians, hey, we can't go, can you take our kids? That was fine. But we didn't set up small groups. We had more adult to kid ratio than ever, and we had all these dads because they were available in the evenings. And so it's not a matter of VBS is bad. VBS can be awesome. It's a matter of what works in your church, and going, do we do it in the evening? Do we do the sports camps, and you try things, you learn from it, and you try something different. And then you'll land on what works in your church by the results. You evaluate the results. And that's one thing that too many leaders don't do. They just do it because they've always done it, or their boss asked them to do it. And I had to challenge my pastor. VBS was in my job description. And but our new church mission was equipping believers to impact their world. So I just went to my boss and I said, hey, I am so on board with your new mission for our church to equip believers to impact the world. And so what I want to do is I want to equip our families to host these. So I pitched it not as something I wanted to do, but something I want to do in response to what he was challenging the church to do. And so sometimes you've got to reframe, and so, I didn't do part of my job description, which was VBS.
Yeah, you were able to, like you said, reframe that to fit with the vision and mission.
Yeah,
I think that's another critical piece, for us who are serving in churches.
Well, then you get the pastor from the pulpit saying, I want you hosting one of these this summer.
Yeah, that's awesome.
You claim to love the Lord and have a passion for the lost, and you've got a big yard. Turn that yard into a church. The church was started as house churches. So,
well, and Christine mentioned, she's doing what you've, kind of highlighted and underscored, which is at their church, they do a morning and evening VBS. It's the same thing, but it caters to different family needs. So she's trying to think through how can I best serve.
That's going the extra mile.
Yeah, that's pretty awesome. And well done, to have to double up and the day, to eat morning and evening. You're living VBS, Christine. So job well done. I was going to say this is actually something new, so I don't know how well it will turn out. But by way of thinking outside of the box for VBS, our church this summer is actually investing in some of the things you were talking about, to get like a trailer and then a big grill. And then some jumpies and that kind of thing, and is encouraging our church family to host block parties. So for their neighborhood to come, and our family is going to be one of those families that does that.
Hey, what day? I'll be there.
Yeah, that's right. I'll be cooking up some hot dogs and hamburgers. So this is just one of those things we got to think. How can we think differently? How can we, in order to reach people, today in our communities? Yeah. I'd say where I live in northern Illinois, and our neighborhood has plenty of people who are walking around. There's a bunch of kids in that neighborhood, but as we moved in, we kind of heard as people are asking, hey, what do you do, or what are you involved in? As you kind of get to know your neighbor. There's pretty much a solid Yeah, like, hey, as soon as they find out I have anything to do with ministry, and they somehow get there, even though, I try
Yeah.
to make it seem like I'm a regular guy. Um, yeah, right. You know exactly what I'm
Yeah.
talking about. But eventually they say, well, I don't really go to church. I'm not interested in that. Please don't ask me, And so, okay, but we host a chili cook-off, or we host something like that, and that's an easy invite,
Yeah.
and like you're saying, and not a bait and switch thing where all of a sudden,
it's breaking down the barriers so that they start to realize that their stereotypical image based on media and comedies, or unfortunately other Christians that they have met. It's not always an unfair stereotype, but nevertheless, we have to redefine that, and it can be really fun to do. Now, I do birthday parties. Now, obviously, not everyone's a magician, but I will do free birthday parties for any kid in my church. And the reason I will do that, and from a business point of view, I'm going to meet other kids. I'll get some other birthday parties. So I'll acknowledge the marketing aspect, but there's also a ministry aspect, because the moms stand around and they go, "That's your kid's pastor?" And say, "Yeah, he does stuff like this every Sunday at church," and I'm getting to meet 8 to 10 of one of my church kids' friends, and so the next time they invite them to church we took speed stacks, and they have this stack up every fall, where I think they're getting close to 1 million kids a year stacking on the same day. I've got a video on my YouTube channel about that. That's a great event. I did sports stacking clinics. In fact, this first summer I did that. It was just because kids' church was ending. We take the summer off, and I was like, man, how am I going to relate to the kids? So I decided to do sports stacking clinics, and my intention was not outreach. I was totally focused on relational ministry, a chance to play with the kids, no devotions. I'd always open in prayer. And we ended up having over 80 to 90 kids over the summer start coming to these stacking clinics, because the sports stacking was hot, and they did it at school for 6 weeks, and then they never got to do it again. And so I ended up having to do a fundraiser where the kids can buy cups, and then the church makes some money off it. And I was laughing. At the end of the summer, I was like, I never even planned to do a cup stacking outreach, but I reached more kids through cup stacking that summer than I had through any other outreach. And that's when I worked with Awana and helped them develop an Awana sports stacking kit, because I then incorporated sports stacking into our Awana game time. And then kids wanted to come to Awana to stack cups. And then Awana heard about it. And now Awana, you can go to awana.org/sports stacking. And I'm in the videos teaching how to stack cups. It's a silly thing. But again, it's going, what are kids into? And you might go, stacking cups, I know nothing about that. You might surprise you if you tried a sports stacking thing this summer, that it goes on fire. And it might flop. So I don't know. It might be a Pokemon cards. It might be, I've done yo-yo days. I've done paper airplane days. We did a preschool VBS. There's one church here in Denver that does a great job, Pastor Craig Wilson. He'd be a great CPC speaker. But if you go to, here, I'll just type it in. If you go to kidology.org/DIY, because he doesn't, can't talk and spell, because he doesn't publish his stuff, he throws together these do-it-yourself kits. And he basically says, here's our schedule, here's our logos, here's what we did. You have to unpack it and grow and do it yourself. But he's done a Lego one and a glow-in-the-dark one, and there's a third one. It's escaping me at the moment. But yeah, it's a matter of going, what will reach our community? And it's fun.
Yeah, that's awesome. I want to, before we kind of close, I want to get to something that Rebecca has said, and that is, she goes, my mind is spinning. Sometimes I feel the we is I have people bought in, but this feels daunting. Karl, as someone who has walked the road in a number of different environments, with a number of different senior leaders and teams on your own.
Don't do it if it's an I do it.
How can Rebecca move from the place of this feels daunting to forward.
You start praying about it, and we say that sometimes as a given, but it's for real. You start praying about it. God, give me a vision for a creative way to reach kids in the neighborhood. And then you start talking to people about it. Summer of 2017, maybe too soon. It may be summer of 2018. And you start telling people, hey, I want to reach unchurched kids. And you start sharing that prayer request. Then you start sharing your ideas, and you start putting a team together. And you don't say, will you lead it? Say, would you just be a part of praying with me? Because as people pray with you, their heart begins to change. Would you be willing to be on a team that does whatever? Maybe you decide, hey, I want to try this backyard Bible blast thing. Then you start asking people, say, I'm doing some research. I have this crazy idea. I don't know if that has anything to do with you, but just to help me research, how would you feel about doing something? I'm not asking you, but do you think a person like you would be receptive to opening their yard? Do you even think about your neighbors? Do you know your neighbors? And so you're not necessarily recruiting, you're learning information. Do you know anyone in the church that, like, obviously I'm a magician, so that was an easy, I'll just do the magic show myself. But are there anyone in our church that does magic? Or do we have any balloon people? Do you know a Christian clown? And then you start going, well, maybe the Fellowship of Christian Magicians has a chapter in my town. And I go to their meeting and say, man, I'm thinking of doing something next summer. Would one of you be willing to be the entertainment, but we'll take care of everything else? So you just start, but you do start forming a team, and you don't do it. Because if it's of God, and hear me, if it's of God, you will not do it alone. If you do it alone, it's of you. And that doesn't make it bad. You have a big heart and a great heart, and you want to reach kids. But if it's a God thing, he will bring people along.
Yeah.
And he'll surprise you, because he'll bring people that are not already involved in the kids ministry.
Yeah. I think you're absolutely right.
Yeah, I had a wealthy lady who heard about it, and she came to me and said, Karl, you can use my F-450 and my horse trailer. And I would drive to her house, leave my car, get her big truck, which I was scared to drive. I'd hitch up her trailer. And then all summer we left our stuff in there, and I would drive to her mansion, at the end, and park the truck in the trailer, lock it, get in my little Chevette and drive home. And I didn't even know her. She wasn't a children's ministry volunteer. She did become one after that summer. But yeah, it was just you talk it up, and your passion and excitement becomes contagious, and people want to be a part of it. Come up with a cool name and a logo and wear the t-shirt, whatever. You just go, how do I get this idea out there? But yeah, don't let it be daunting. Let it be exciting, and just say, God, if you want to do something big and crazy, I'm willing. Show me who to talk to. Show me, give me the idea. And I bet what you start with will not be what you end up doing, but God will transition it there.
Yeah, I think I want to just put a bow on one of the things that you said that I think is instructive for all of us in ministry, and that's the fact that when God really calls us to do something, he obligates himself to give us what we need to get it done. And that's just, we see that played out in Scripture time and time again. And even the stories of those who did feel alone, like in Elijah, who comes to mind. I'm alone. And God all of a sudden just starts revealing the people that he's brought and supported, around him there in First Kings. So our prayers are with you, Rebecca. If it didn't feel daunting, it wouldn't require faith.
Exactly.
Well,
doing a God-sized thing.
Yeah.
But trusting God to make it happen.
Yeah, that's awesome. Karl, thank you so much for taking time here over the last half hour, 40 minutes to talk to us about ways we can just be thinking outside of VBS so we can reach the people God's called us to. Again, folks, many of you know Karl and his ministry at Kidology, but you can go visit them. Please do. Karl posted and talked about a number of links, but go to kidology.org. Hit them up on Facebook as well, so you can just be continually connecting. And I know Karl is always having conversations about these topics in those different places. So folks, thank you so much. And for those of you who are going to continue being part of our INCM Web Week that link will be the one that you've been accessing throughout the day. And for everyone else, thanks for joining us during this time, and we hope to see you soon. Bye, Karl.
All right. Thank you so much.